Happy Wednesday. Welcome to this installment of the California Policy Forum. This is an ongoing quarterly series that's co-presented by Philanthropy California, that's Northern California Grantmakers, Southern California Grantmakers, and Catalyst of San Diego and Imperial counties. The California Association of Nonprofits, also known as Cal Nonprofits, and the League of California Community Foundations, that's my organization. I'm Laura Seaman, I'm your host today. The League is a statewide coalition of 30 community foundations across California. We're very grateful for the leadership and the partnership of the Philanthropy California Coalition and of Cal Nonprofits for coming together on this collaborative series and on today's webinar, where we'll dive into the redistricting process and explore some opportunities for engagement and input by civil society leaders like yourselves. So let's get started. We're grateful to have Christian Arana moderating today's session. Christian is Vice President of Policy at the Latino Community Foundation and brings an important perspective to today's conversation. Welcome, Christian, and over to you now to introduce our topic and speakers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Laura, and thank you to the organizers of this event. I'm super excited to be part of this conversation and moderate this conversation. So the Latino Community Foundation, we're California's sole philanthropic organization that's focused on unleashing the civic and economic power of Latinos in the state of California. And when it comes to that piece about civic power, there's no greater way to build it, to secure it, to attain it than by redistricting, which is why our foundation is heavily invested in making sure that the Latino community participates in this redistricting cycle. I'll say on a more personal level, this is my first time coming into a redistricting conversation. If I can reveal my age, 10 years ago, I was in college. And for myself as well, like I'm now coming into consciousness about what this is and why it matters and why people should participate in it. So the panelists that we have today are going to walk us through what their work has been like, why it's important that they get involved in redistricting, because this is something that happens every 10 years. It's similar to the census, where every 10 years, we're asking our people to come together. And it's not just, looking at a map and squiggling some lines, right? It's actually so much more than that. It's about coming together and asking our residents from our state to vocalize, who they are, where they come from, hear their stories. So these redistricting commissions from the state level all the way down to the local level, it's super important that our communities show up to help redraw these lines in the spirit of fairness, right? And in the spirit of making sure that people are adequately represented. So today for our panel, we have Commissioner Pastor Trina Turner, who's one of the commissioners of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission. Jonathan Mehta Stein, the Executive Director of California Common Cause, has done phenomenal work, especially at the local level when it comes to redistricting, to making sure that people are aware that this is happening and that people need to participate. And then Silton from the Thrive Alliance. She's the Director of Advocacy and Education. This coalition, this alliance in San Mateo County has done amazing work in making sure that nonprofits, philanthropy, just a cross-sector coalition just come together for moments like this, right? So to kick off the conversation, I'll turn it over first to Commissioner Turner to give us a high-level overview about redistricting. And again, for many of you that are on this webinar, I always need a refresher. It can be a complex subject, but the commission, especially Commissioner Turner, just do really great ways to distill this very complex information in a way that's easy and accessible. And our great challenge will be, how do we do that for all of the people that we care about, all the communities that we care about. So I'll turn it over to you, Pastor Trina, to kick us off.
Okay, and thank you, Christian. And I'd like to say thank you all for inviting me, the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, to present to you today. My name is Pastor Trina Turner, and I'm one of the 14 commissioners selected to draw the new electoral district lines that follows our 2020 census. I want to just, before I go into the formal presentation, just quickly let you know that I'm also an executive director for Faith in the Valley that operates in California's Central Valley. In 5 counties, we're a multi-faith, multiracial organization that works to put power into the hands of the people. Let's go into our presentation today. In this Redistricting Basics presentation, we're going to be going over who the commission is, what we do, and how we'd love for you to get involved in the process. As a reminder, there will be no public input taken today. We are in public input time right now, and I'll be talking to you about that in a bit. But for today, just a friendly reminder, our California Government Code, Section 8253, strictly forbids commissioners and staff from taking public input outside of a regularly scheduled commission meeting or official public input meeting. However, at any point through this presentation or directly afterwards, we invite you to visit our website at wedrawthelineca.org to provide input, and instructions is there as far as how you'll go about making your public comment. So on slide 3, what is redistricting? We're trying really hard to make redistricting exciting, but it is a challenging topic. So refreshers, yes, Christian, is needed. And I think we found that it's been helpful for most of the people that we've presented to. Redistricting is defined as drawing new boundaries that determine which Californians are represented by each electoral district. So why we draw district lines on slide 4. We have to redraw districts every 10 years. And it's important to note that within the 10-year time period, there is quite a bit that change. You know, of course, that communities change, our priorities, our interests, our goals change. Within that time period, people are born, we lose people, people die, and then people move in and out of California. Communities will grow and shrink, and areas where there was roughly the same number of people ultimately becomes unequal. So this is why it is important that our districts are redrawn as the communities change to ensure that the new districts will reflect those changes. One of the greatest powers that the people of California have is to elect their own representatives to conduct the business of their government. How the district boundaries are configured can make the difference between empowering and maximizing the voters' voices or minimizing and muting those voices. And in most states, politicians redraw districts and often end up drawing safe districts for themselves to allow them to stay into office. And we know redistricting has been used at times to exclude communities from political power. So by fully participating in and monitoring the upcoming redistricting process, more communities could have the opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. So speaking up about your community is critical to help keep your community whole to the extent possible. And this ensures that your voice is heard by your elected leaders when making decisions such as the quality and funding of education or determining your tax rates. So your input is valuable in shaping the new political boundaries. So on slide 6, we thought it would be beneficial for us to break down how redistricting affects you directly. So in our first illustration, we have power to the people. The Voters First Act was historic in California, and it transferred the power of drawing district maps away from politicians and gave it to the people. Having the opportunity to elect representatives that champion your issues is important in a state like California, because you know issues vary drastically from one street to the next, let alone one area. So Northern California could champion environmental and economic issues, while Central California might champion water and agricultural issues. Then those of you in Southern California with the traffic, you might champion issues that deal with transportation, housing, and employment. Tied to the issue of electing representatives that champion your issues, you will want to also elect representatives that have your financial interest at heart. So when the time comes to build the budget, you will want a representative fighting to ensure your community gets the financial resources it deserves for various services such as water and fire protection. The redistricting process is all about drawing lines and determining which communities get grouped into which districts. So your input in this process is essential to help the commissioners understand where your community starts and where it ends. Redistricting is one of the few civic activities that any Californian can provide input to regarding their community that ultimately impacts the law and regulations, tax structure, how funding is distributed, and which services are provided. Next slide, please. The US Constitution requires that every American receive as close to equal representation as possible in government. So as populations of districts change over time, it can leave some people overrepresented and others underrepresented in government. So redistricting evens out the population between districts. So after the federal government publishes the census information, California must redraw the boundaries of its congressional, the state Senate, the state assembly, and the state board of equalization districts so that the districts correctly reflect the latest count of the state's population. Redistricting is based on the idea that each of our voices should be represented fairly by creating districts that have the same number of people. Census results are used to draw new maps every 10 years to account for the ways that the populations have changed and moved across the states and the districts. So at the federal level, we know reapportionment takes place to reallocate the US House seats among the states. This too happens after our national census to ensure that seats are held by the states in proportion to the size of their population. And I know by now you all know that California now has 52 House seats. And that could still change as we get updated census numbers, but for now, 52 House seats. Historically, legislators have drawn maps that allow them to choose their constituents rather than enabling constituents to choose their representatives. So that former system undermined the concept of fair representation, which is to give people the power to choose their representatives. So on slide 8, we talked about how redistricting affects you. And now I want to talk a little bit, explain about why independent redistricting matters. I love this particular slide. When democracy depends on it, right? So when elected officials redraw lines of their own districts, they get to design their own territory and choose who their voters are. So the slide here, this slide highlights key terms in redistricting to help you understand why it's important to delegate the power of redistricting to the people. Anytime you start talking about redistricting, you're going to hear gerrymandering, that term gerrymandering. Gerrymandering happens when the election district boundaries are drawn in a way that gives a particular set of people, like a political party or racial group, an unfair political advantage over another. So this graph shows a jurisdiction of 50 people, 60% orange, 40% purple. And it shows 5 districts, how it can be drawn in multiple ways that are not always fair. So your first 2 examples show 2 ways to draw district lines in a fair manner, where the districts are drawn to reflect the population proportionately. Then the 2 examples on the far right shows ways to draw district maps in a manner that does not reflect the population fairly, which is referred to as gerrymandering. And this is why independent commissions like California's was created, so that we remove the politics from the process and we began to focus on the people. Justin Levitt, the House Senior Policy Advisor for Democracy and Voting Rights, he said it best. He said, if you care about health, race, equity, economic education, environment, et cetera, then you should be also interested in redistricting. So on slide 9, there is a criteria that we have to follow. The commission must follow this criteria in this order when drawing district maps. Number 1, districts must be of nearly equal population to comply with the US Constitution. Number 2, districts must comply with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Number 3, districts must be drawn contiguously so that all parts of the district are connected to each other. 4, districts must minimize the division of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest to the extent possible. We'll talk a lot about communities of interest in a moment. Districts, number 5, should be geographically compact such that nearby areas of population are not bypassed for more distant populations. This requirement refers to density, not shape. And then number 6, where practicable, each Senate district should be comprised of 2 complete and adjacent assembly districts. And then Board of Equalization districts should be comprised of 10 complete and adjacent state Senate districts. So in addition, the place of residence of any incumbent or political candidate may not be considered in the creation of a map, and districts may not be drawn for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent, a political candidate, or a political party. Slide 10. We are one of many redistricting efforts occurring in California. So the commission, we're redrawing districts for state offices, while counties, cities, school districts, water districts, and community college districts are also redrawing their districts at the same time. So we lift this up, bring it to your attention because different efforts are happening simultaneously and it can be confusing. Aside from being involved in the state redistricting process, we encourage you to also be involved in your local redistricting efforts. So a little bit quick history on slide 11. Prior to 2010s, legislators in California drew lines. If the legislature failed to properly draw lines, then we know the court drew the lines. In 2008, California voters passed Prop 11, the Voters First Act, authorizing the creation of an independent commission to draw new district lines for those 4 bodies, the State Senate, State Assembly, the Board of Equalization 3 initially. And then in 2010, Prop 20 is what added the 4th, the Voters First Act for Congress added in the responsibility of drawing congressional districts to the commission. So our goal as a commission is to spread the word, and we're so glad that we're presenting to you today because we know you'll help with that the people's role did not end with being counted in the census, and to collect valuable community input to assist us in the process of drawing new districts. 2010 Redistricting Commission was California's first independent commission. The 2020 Redistricting Commission is building upon their work and will leave behind detailed documents to assist the 2030 Commission when they perform their duties. So as you see on the slide, there are other states with independent commissions, including Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Michigan, Montana, and Washington. So this process, let's talk about how did we get here? Commissioner selection, oh my. The commissioners all went through a rigorous application process that attracted over 20,000 applicants in 2019. And thank you, Christian. I know I personally reached out to him. I was like, Christian, help me make sense of this process. Well, after an initial review, over 2,000 individuals completed a supplemental application. And after a very thorough and public review, 120 applicants, 40 Democrats, 40 Republicans, 40 others were invited to interview, from which 60 were chosen to be presented to the legislature. Then the California legislator, they were allowed to remove no more than, but up to 24 candidates, 8 from each pool, from consideration, which left a total of 36. And then the first 8 members, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, 2 others, were selected in a public drawing on July 2020. And I want you to know I was the first ball drop. I have that distinction to name when that public drawing happened. And then the final 6 members were selected, where we used a very careful process, taking into consideration political party, geography, race, gender, expertise. We wanted to balance all of that out. So on slide 13, I'd love for you to meet your 2020 commission. We are a 14-member commission made up of 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, 4 members not affiliated with either of those 2 parties. You see the names and places that they come from, but we all represent the whole of California. The commissioners are a diverse group of individuals. We're as diverse in geography as we are in opinions, expertise. We have 7 from Northern California, 7 from Southern California, 8 women, 6 men. We range in age from the 30s to the 60s, holding up that high end. There are NGO leaders, engineers, pastors, law enforcement officers, political scientists, we have a lawyer, and most of us are public servants. We invite you to join us at our meetings. They're currently still held online, but we know that is soon changing. Slide 14, commissioner duties. We do these education sessions. We've done this now for quite a while. And now we're also in the period of public input meetings. And listen, I really would like for you all to push our public input meetings, make sure that you're participating. We have public input meetings coming up. The next one is on July 19th, which is our next statewide public input meeting. And I'll probably say this again because we really would love for you to participate in that session. The commission will ultimately draw maps for 4 different government bodies, 52 for Congress, 40 state Senate, 80 state assembly, 4 Board of Equalization. And the example you see on your slide is just from Sacramento to demonstrate what different maps could look like for each district type. From February to May, on slide 15, we're conducting these, here we are in June, right? So we pushed it out a little bit. So from February through, I think we're actually going to do a couple more even up and through July. We've done these redistricting basic presentations to educate the public about the redistricting process. The commission divided the state into 11 outreach zones to better manage our outreach efforts and to build relationships with community groups. Please note, this was only done as a way for us to attack, divide, and conquer, and ensure that all of the groups, they have no other significance than that. We are eager to engage with all communities, and we've set up redistricting basics. We now also have this basic presentation available in video form if you want to share it out with any of your constituents. On slide 16, when drawing maps, we have to be mindful of communities of interest. I told you we'd come back here. We can obtain the city and county information, but we need communities of interest information from Californians. This is crucial. Communities of interest, they're defined as a concentrated population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Examples include areas in which the people share similar living standards. Maybe they have similar cultures, use the same transportation, maybe the same work opportunities. And people can belong to multiple communities of interest. So keep in mind, a community interest is not the same as a district, but communities of interest are the key building blocks that make up districts. Some ways to describe your community could be geographic, could be using boundaries, towns, county areas, or just things that you have in common. So on our slide 17, defining communities, they can be described by creating maps, perhaps you'd want to do, or tell us about your community. There are no clear rules on how to define a community of interest, but we do give some examples. Oral testimony, personal stories are powerful. You know, they stick with you, they go home with you. So please consider oral testimony. Share examples of things members of your community have in common. Think about if you were describing your community to someone that was visiting, what would you say about it? Are there festivals or parks that are common in your area? What's the history of how your community came together? And this can be done at commission meetings or hearings, such as the one, hint, hint, coming up on June 19th. Also, you can submit written testimony. A written description can be used to tell your community's story, describing what connects people and why it's important that they be kept together. Community issues, communities often get involved in redistricting because they feel that their issues have not been adequately addressed by their elected representatives. So highlighting community issues and personal stories and written narratives help demonstrate the importance of having elected officials who understand and respond to community needs. From your perspective, we are also recommending that you submit communities of interest that reflects your organization's perspective. Educate and engage your constituents, including clients, board members, and staff about redistricting. And then, of course, you'd want to follow us on social media for that. Boundary maps. Slide 18, how do you participate in the process? Your input indeed is valuable to the success of the community. So 3 different ways. Of course, describe your community, telling us about it, Tell us about who you want to be connected with, nearby areas you don't want to be in a district with. Tell us that, that matters. And if you love the district that you're already in, call, write, email, tell us that. It's important if you want your district to stay the same, that we need to hear that as well, so that we can log that you like where you are and you don't want any changes to it. Don't say it's fine, I don't need to call. If it's fine, you still need to let us know. So draw or send your testimony in, and all of this can be done by using a tool that was created. This was not available in 2010. We do have a community of interest tool that you can use right now by visiting drawmycacommunity.org. Slide 19. You can provide public input to the commission, including submitting your input through the tool that we talked about. You can visit our website, wedrawthelineca.org, email us, phone us, and of course, postal mail still works. Now, here's something that's really exciting, we're proud of. In addition to English, our online community of interest tool is also available in all of the languages that you see on slide 19. They're available in Spanish, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Korean, Armenian, Farsi, Arabic, Russian, Japanese, Punjabi, Khmer. So we're excited about that. Slide 20, language access is very important to the commission. We've taken several steps to ensure more Californians will be able to participate in the process. And matter of factly, all of our information, we now have our fact sheets, flyers. This district redistricting basic presentation has been also translated into all of the languages that we've talked about. In addition, please note that we will provide, my grandmother would say, level best to provide interpretation services for the public comment sections of our CRC business meetings if we're provided with 5 days advance notice. Written input can be sent to the CRC in any format and language, and it will be translated into English. I hope you can pick up by now, we want to hear from all Californians. If anyone needs an interpreter to provide input, we ask that, again, you notify the commission 5 business days prior to a meeting to request interpreter services, and the commission will attempt to contract with an interpreter in the requested language. So as we're wrapping up, slide 21, COVID-19 has delayed many things, of course, we know that, including our ability to access census data to help us draw maps. So back on February 12th, the Census Bureau announced it would deliver redistricting data to all states by September 30th. March, it talked about, okay, we get that in legacy format in late August. And so any delay after July 31st in the state receiving the census data means that the commission's final maps would be due after December 15th. We're working with the legislature and others to minimize the impact on the delay of the 2022 elections. So we're still having those conversations. So for a timeline, you see that on our slide 22, you have a timeline there that best I can tell you about this that is really, really flexible. We've done these presentations. The reapportionment data did come out. We are right now in a time period between now and August of doing our public input meetings. But for your body, you see the dates that's here. Continue to follow it closely online. I wanted to have you think about it probably a little bit differently. So for winter, spring time period, of course, we've done the public education. Spring and summer, right now we're doing our community of interest input. And what we'd like for you to do during this time period is to submit a COI for your organization. Consider that. Consider supporting constituents and submitting COIs. Training sessions, host mapping sessions. That would be something very important, very helpful. And then in the fall, you'll want, this is when we'll be doing our line drawing, you'll want to encourage that your constituents submit public comments about our maps. Let us know if we're on track or if you feel there needs to be changes there. You want to make sure that you're encouraging others, your board members, yourselves, to make sure that you're engaging with us through that process. So for a timeline, our final district maps will be out somewhere between December 2021 and February 2022. And the dates will continue to be updated on our website once the census data is received and the commission adopts the final schedule. Slide 23, just as a reminder today, again, cannot take any public comment input during this particular session. But again, you have all of the important website information to reach out, and instructions on how to do so will be found there under the public comment section. So slide 24, again, because we want to continue engaging with the public, we want to make sure that you have a way to reach us. Our outreach director, marcy.kaplan@crc.ca.gov. Please do follow us on social media at wedrawthelines.ca. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. So we want you to be able to find us, know how to keep up with us. And with that, I want to say thank you for allowing me to do a presentation today. I'm looking forward to hear your voices, see your names in our public input sessions. And I just thank you again for your time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, and we can field perhaps a couple questions.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Commissioner Turner, for all of that. Again, I mean, this is always very valuable, even for myself, as I learn about redistricting. A couple of questions actually just came in regards to the commissioners themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'll try to merge these two questions, but one person asked like how we can, I guess for the next go round of the commission, how we can kind of like expand the criteria, because it seems like it almost excluded young people and newly naturalized citizens. I think one of the requirements was like if you voted in the last couple elections or something.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that one part. And then the other part, one person asked about representation of political parties. I believe like there has to be like equal political balance, I believe, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we try and balance out. There is a desire to balance out, answering your last question first, there is a desire to balance out political parties. That's because we want everyone to be equitably represented. And as far as young people, we do have a couple of young people on the commission staff. But beyond that, and for those that are, you talked about young people and you talked about another group of individuals.
Newly naturalized citizens to become
because of some of the requirements that's there that says, you know, if you've voted so much, all of those things, just like when the Prop 20 was put into place, the fact that the independent commission, all of that were things that were fought for, a policy that was changed. It would require a change in requirements, but that's what we can start working on now for 2030. So some of those requirements are lifted, shifted in a way that will not exclude people that are recently naturalized.
Got it. I think we're running short on time, so if everyone will forgive me, I think we'll move on to the next portion of the panel. I want to welcome in Jonathan Stein, who will go even deeper on redistricting, because I mean, Pastor Trina is on a statewide commission, but Jonathan is doing a lot of phenomenal work, especially at the local level. So Jonathan, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you, Commissioner Turner, for that really fabulous presentation. That was excellent. I am going to share my screen now, and Christian, if you could just give me a thumbs up if you're seeing my first slide in presenter mode. Great. Okay. So I'm going to focus today on opportunities for redistricting at the local level. My name is Jonathan Stein. I'm the Executive Director at California Common Cause. Good morning, everyone. California Common Cause is a democracy reform organization that works to build a better, fair, more equitable democracies in California at the local and state levels. We are essentially the in-house democracy nerds for the organizations you work for, you lead, or you fund. And so if you're interested in really detailed policy questions around voting rights or election administration, around redistricting, around money and politics, and so on, we're your go-to, and we're always happy to continue the conversation. So I have the opportunity today to talk to you about local redistricting. And we heard so much about the State Commission, which is incredibly important work and an incredibly important opportunity for our communities. But there's also opportunities at the local level, and that's what we want to talk about today. So the frame I hope everyone will use when they think about this topic, first and foremost, is that you've spent thousands of hours, you and your staff, thousands of hours working on the census, or if you're part of philanthropy, you saw and you helped facilitate millions of dollars in funding for outreach to our communities on Census 2020. Redistricting is where Census 2020 meets power building. It's where we have an opportunity to take the turnout for the census. We have the opportunity to take the count that we all worked so hard for in the census and turn that into new political representation. All right, so local redistricting is important first and foremost because it determines who holds power in our local communities. As Pastor Turner mentioned, local redistricting will determine if a community is kept whole in a single district, enabling it to control the outcome of the election in that district, and electing representation that understands community needs and will fight for the community, or it can cut a community up and divide it into multiple districts, so its voting strength is diluted and it can't influence the outcome of an election in any particular jurisdiction. This has a wide range of consequences on issues that you care about, you work on, or you fund. Health equity, environmental justice, policing and law enforcement, housing affordability, the quality of schools. These are all decisions made by local decision makers, people elected in city council districts and county board of supervisor districts. It's also the case that while the census and the federal government determine how much funding comes to our local communities, and the census count determines whether we get our fair share of federal funding, it's local decision makers who actually determine how that money is spent. As a result, local redistricting determines which communities are invested in and which communities continue to suffer from a pattern of neglect and disinvestment. There are more reasons why local redistricting matters and how it is connected to power. Local redistricting controls the entry point into politics, and thus it determines our future leaders at the state and federal level. If you look at federal leaders from California, they got their start in city councils and county boards of supervisors. If we create equitable districts that allow emerging communities to actually claim power for the first time, those folks will be in a position to hold power at the state and federal levels in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Local redistricting also determines which communities decision makers are responsive to and which ones they're accountable to. So I want to share with you now an example of Watts from 2003. So in Watts in 2003, November of 2003, a freak storm dumped 5 inches of rain and hail on Watts and the surrounding areas. It overwhelmed storm drains and flooded the community. About 150 buildings and homes were heavily damaged. 50,000 people lost power. 6,000 people sought aid from the county's emergency center. Firefighters rescued over 100 people from waist-deep water and snow. Many people lost everything. But the state and federal governments were slow to act. FEMA refused to do anything, and Governor Gray Davis declared a state of emergency almost a week after the flood actually occurred. Now, why was all of that? Well, of course, it's because of patterns of disinvestment and underinvestment that are tied to legacies or tied to race and tied to class. We are familiar with these issues, but it was also because Watts was split into a variety of political districts. At the congressional level, it was split into 3 districts. At the state Senate level, it was split into 3 districts. And what that meant was that residents of Watts couldn't get the attention and support that they needed. This is a quote from a former congressional staffer. At the time of the 2003 flood, I remember our office trying to be very responsive, but there was a lot of ping-ponging constituents between elected representatives. Watts is cut into 3 different congressional and state Senate districts. Residents who live on the same street might live in different districts. There was a lot of unnecessary frustration from constituents during a difficult time. This never would have happened if Watts belonged in one district. And then, after people organized in the 2011 cycle, Watts leaders unified in front of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission that Commissioner Turner spoke so eloquently about just a moment ago. And the end result, Watts was kept whole in its political districts. Okay, so local redistricting makes a huge difference in terms of who has power, who has a say, who has voice, and who's listened to. So how do we actually engage our local communities in local redistricting processes in this upcoming cycle? The first thing you have to do is help people understand what communities of interest are. This is a topic that Commissioner Turner spent a lot of time on, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on here as well, because it is a term, community of interest, or COI or COI, that you are going to hear hundreds of times over the next 6 months, all right? So I'm going to take a detour from collecting and gathering COI to define COI one more time. At the local level, a community of interest is defined as a population that shares common social or economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its fair and effective representation. Okay, so I just read you a legal definition, and you're probably thinking to yourself, great, that's helpful, I guess, but I don't actually know what you're talking about. What is a community of interest? More broadly, a community of interest is a group or a network that shares interests or views or culture or histories or language or values, right? So for example, a community of folks who have shared interests around a particular set of schools or a particular set of parks, or a particular set of land use decisions that are tied to environmental justice issues and health conditions, that might be a community of interest. Folks who use common social or civic networks like a church or a temple or a nonprofit service provider, that could be a community of interest. Folks with the same immigrant history, right? Or folks who speak the same language, that's also a community of interest. So more concretely, for example, San Diego has a historic LGBT neighborhood called Hillcrest. That might be a community of interest. I worked for a while on the city of Chula Vista's districting process, where they moved to districts for the first time. And there was a low-income part of town on the west side of town, on the wrong, quote unquote, wrong side of the highway, that had suffered from a pattern of underinvestment and didn't have sidewalks or street lights or any other public services. That was a community of interest. Okay, so now that we know what community of interest is, first step is we need to help community members understand what a community of interest is. Now, it's as simple as saying, right, as Commissioner Turner said, sharing your story. But that doesn't, my experience has been that doesn't really connect with people because people are not accustomed to their democracy asking them to share their story. There is no other democratic process that we ever encounter in which our governing bodies say to the community, come forward, speak to us, tell us your story. And because no one has any practice doing that, if you say to people, really the point here is sharing the story of your community, people are like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. And also, I don't even know how to do it. But luckily, the organizations on this call, you employ community organizers and others who have been doing this work for years. It's all the same sort of thing that you've done before, holding community meetings, holding workshops, getting people educated and engaged in the process. Once you have people's attention, you want to help them identify their COI or their COI. I've done this before where I've sat in coffee shops or across a kitchen table with a printed 11 by 14 map of a city and given people Sharpies and said, just mark where you live, where you work, where you play, where you worship, where you gather, mark where your community tends to live, what markets they use, what nonprofits they're a part of, and so on, right? Or you can take a projector screen and put a big map on the wall, and you can have a larger group setting in which you talk about communities of interest in a large group setting. These are things that I'm sure that the community organizers on your staff have been doing for years and years and years. Okay, next step, help folks draft and prep their COI testimony. We're asking folks who have probably never spoken to a democratic body in their lives to come forward and tell their stories. They're going to need speakers trainings. We have a template on our website. I'm going to show you a screenshot of that in just 1 second. That can be used to help people formulate their COI testimony. And you're going to have to give people detail on their local redistricting processes. The statewide commission is super well organized. They have a calendar of all their hearings coming up. Everyone can know months in advance when they'll have an opportunity to testify. That's not true at the local level. Every city, every county, every school board is leading their own process, often with murky details. And so you're going to have to leaders in the community or community organizers are going to have to find those details and share them with community members. And verbal testimony submitted to a city council or school board about your community of interest is supported or strengthened if you can actually provide a map. And that could be a map of just your community of interest. It can be a map of what you want your political district to be. Or if you're feeling really ambitious, it can be a map of the full district map, right? Let's say you have 5 city council seats in your city. You can just map your neighborhood. You can map what you want your 1 of 5 districts to be, or you could map all 5 districts. There are some simple online mapping tools that you can use. Districtor is one. The State Commission's app, drawmycacommunity.org, is another. You can download the community map into a PDF, and even though it was meant to be used for the State Commission, you can just download it as a PDF and submit it in your local process in addition. Okay, here's a template of what a community of interest testimony might look like. Hi, my name is so-and-so. I've lived in the community for so-and-so years. I'd like you to keep my community together. My community is defined by, and there's a bunch of prompts that helps people work their way through all this. Okay, There's lots more information that you might need to know about local redistricting, and we have resources available for you. So if you want to know more about redistricting law and you want to go deep on the law that governs redistricting, or you want to know about the process requirements, like how much public education does my city council need to do? What languages will they translate their outreach materials into? If you just want to know best practices from around the state, if you want that template I mentioned earlier, or you want sample outreach materials, go to our website. This is our hub for all local redistricting materials. It has that template and a variety of other resources and materials. It has web trainings, video trainings, commoncause.org/local redistricting 2021, or you can email us at redistrictingca@commoncause.org. Thanks very much for your time. I look forward to the rest of the presentations and then questions afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I think in the interest of time, we'll go straight to Petra for her presentation. And then afterwards, if we have a couple minutes left, we'll be able to answer some of these questions that are coming in. So Petra, I'll kick it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you so much for Commissioner Turner and Jonathan for those great presentations that really talked about the significance, why we're doing this, as well as some of the mechanics. And so what I wanted to do was to give an example of what you can actually do as a funder or as a nonprofit. So Thrive is the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County. We empower nonprofits to thrive. And we kind of do it to 3 different methods. So next, we do it through policy and advocacy. We advocate both for nonprofits and for nonprofit issues. We do it through, we do it through cross-sector collaboration. So even though we are an alliance of nonprofits, we also welcome government, business, and philanthropy because we know they're our partners. And then next, nonprofit capacity building. It would be great if nonprofits had all of the time and money in the world, but they don't. So we do a lot of support for nonprofits. And redistricting fits into all of those things, where we believe that, as Jonathan was talking about, that really the power building comes from people being represented. So that's the policy and advocacy part. Having funders and government as partners makes redistricting more effective. And again, with capacity building, a lot of local nonprofits don't have the capacity, the time, the focus to work on this. So we help them by providing all kinds of tools. Next slide. So in San Mateo County, this is just an example. No, sorry, next. San Mateo County's county supervisors are 100% white, and our county is 40% white. Next. So that's not representative. And redistricting is an opportunity to change that. In the Bay Area as a whole, 60% people of color, but only 34% for top elected officials. So in addition to all of the things that Jonathan and Commissioner Turner mentioned, this is an opportunity to change that. The next slide. Thrive saw its role very much as, next, educating, providing support, and advocating for the most fair and inclusive process. Next. We did this, we started the education journey with these 3 events that I have listed there, and you can see our partners across the bottom of the slide. So the first one, Redistricting Once in a Decade Opportunity, was our Redistricting 101. We invited not just all of our partners, but we asked our foundation partners to invite their partners as well. We had Asian Americans Advancing Justice do this 101, but in addition to that, we had someone from our local community talk about how redistricting affected their community. So Pam Jones from Menlo Together spoke about how in Menlo Park, which is a city in San Mateo, they had at-large elections for a long time, and for 30 years there had not been an African-American on the council. But there was an area of Menlo Park that is predominantly people of color, and when they switched to by-district elections, for the first time in 30 years, an African-American was elected to city council. So again, we try to bring in the stories so that people know why redistricting is important. The next event we had, we talked about different redistricting commissions, and actually Jonathan did the presentation for us. so that people really understood how they could get involved. And the last event we had one of the other commissioners, Commissioner Yee, from the State Commission, to talk about, basically to give the same presentation that Commissioner Turner just gave. But then we also, again, wanted to bring it down to our local level. So we had a consultant who's working with some of the local cities speak. And we also had a local school board member from Daly City. So I'm sure not all of you understand all of the intricacies of San Mateo County, but Daly City is on the north end of the county, and our state Senate seat for Daly City comprised of all of San Francisco and just Daly City from San Mateo County. And what Kalima talked about was how, because Daly City is the only part of San Mateo County in this state Senate district, they really felt like they weren't getting the representation they wanted to get. So this is exactly what they're talking about when we're talking about communities of interest. Daly City really feels like it's much more in common with the rest of San Mateo County than with San Francisco. Next slide. So a lot of what makes us able to do what we do is by working with partners. Thrive itself is not an expert in redistricting. So like I said, we had the commissioner come speak. We've had Asian American Advancing Justice, California Common Cause as partners. Next slide. Next. So in addition to having nonprofit partners, we also have our foundation partners. And they have been really great at recognizing why supporting us is important. So the Grow Foundation, which is a local foundation, said philanthropy makes good decisions when they have good information. Thrive is able to talk to many players at once and can synthesize needs and/or opportunities for us to act on. Thrive took the lead in getting folks together because they saw the importance of redistricting and that action needed to be taken. Partners who are quick to respond and quick to activate are invaluable. We have no time to waste, so clear asks from Thrive have been key. So just that, again, this kind of cross-sector collaboration between the foundation and us. And then from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, we've worked with them on voting and other things where we have contracts with the county to do outreach around, we did it around census, doing it around voting, doing it around COVID information. And they are an important part of the funding and of the partnership picture. Foundations, in addition to funding, which of course is the most important, also support with all kinds of other things, including being thought partners and providing other support. And then I want to mention lobbying. So in San Mateo County, the county was very proactive and decided to do an advisory commission really early, like in January, when we were kind of caught a little bit off guard, and they had decided that they were going to have an advisory commission and that the county supervisors were going to pick who was going to be on the commission. And that didn't sound right to us. We wanted an independent commission, or at least to get some better way of picking who was going to do it. It didn't seem right that the people whose lines were being drawn were going to pick the people to draw those lines. So we got together letters. So I've got 18 different organizations, including these two funders, to sign on to a letter that we presented to the Board of Supervisors, saying that we really thought the gold standard is an independent commission. Please do that. If not, at least get us to where we have better people or independent people on the commission. So we weren't successful in getting an independent commission, but I think we were successful anyway in two ways. One is that we really brought to the attention of the Board of Supervisors that we're watching. And it's not just Thrive, but all these other organizations are watching what's going on, and we want to be a part of the process because we feel like it's important. And they did decide, instead of picking their own commissioners, that they would use the League of Women Voters to pick those commissioners. So we did have some success. Next slide. So in San Mateo County, and I'm sure in many of the other counties that you all work in, there are a lot of different jurisdictions that are up for redistricting. We have 16 different jurisdictions. In addition to that, we have 4 that are working on going from at large to districting. So there's a lot to keep track of. So we created a web page to make it easier for everyone to follow. And we have all of the recordings, we have links to things. If you scroll, if you use the QR code to get to our webpage, you'll see you can scroll down, there's a lot more information on it. One of the things I just want to tell a quick story about this as we're reaching out. This particular group that I'm talking to now is pretty educated on all of this. And if you weren't before, a couple hours ago, you certainly are now. But a lot of people aren't, to an extent where when we were calling some of the special districts to ask them, where are you in your redistricting process? One of them said, oh, we did that years ago. So clearly they didn't understand that they get to do it again. All they remembered was that they went from at large to by district. So please feel free to steal anything from our webpage. Reach out to me if you want to know a little bit more about what we did in our county and what we're going to continue to do. Our next training is going to be on the mapping tool so that people can learn how to create the maps that both Jonathan and Commissioner Turner talked about. This is important for so many reasons. And I think the basic reasons that everyone's covered is straightforward. I think we all understand representation and all of that. But it's also, this is a great opportunity to kind of build our civic participation muscle. We want people to learn how to work together. We want people to learn how to understand that representation matters and that they have power. And so, you know, a bonus of this whole process is that we are creating stronger communities to be able to advocate for whatever it is that they need to advocate for next. So thank you very much. And I look forward to questions if we have time for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Petra. That was fantastic. I was looking at your presentation. I didn't realize water districts are also up for redistricting. And I mean, given that our state is pretty much in a drought, people who serve in those positions are critical, you know, to helping solve these issues. So we do have time for Q&A. So if any questions came up for any of you, please put them in the Q&A box. One question that did come up was around the local level. So Jonathan, I want to bring you in for this question since you started talking about this. You know, because this is a process that happens every decade, you know, and people apply to serve on these local commissions. We can't necessarily guarantee that they're automatically experts, that they exactly know what they're doing. So in your work and the things that you've seen, like how do we work with these local commissions to make sure that they have an eye towards equity, that they understand like the importance of what they're doing, making sure that they're doing it right? I think you might be on mute, Jonathan.
Thanks, Christian, I appreciate it. And thank you for the question. So we have to be watchdogging these local redistricting processes really closely. It's just a very labor-intensive thing, right? We have to be involved. If a city's politics or a county's politics or a school board's politics or a water district's politics matter to you in your organization, you need to be watchdogging the redistricting process there. And that's whether they have commissions or don't have commissions. So here's the thing. We have one major tool in our toolkit, which is the Fair Maps Act, which is a bill passed by the state legislature. Common Cause worked on that bill together with a wide range of civil rights and civic engagement partners, MALDEF, NALEO, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, and tons of others. And it brought rules to local redistricting for the first time. It was really the wild, wild west before the Fair Maps Act passed. And what it now contains are ranked criteria that cities and counties have to follow when they draw district lines. And it puts communities right at the top. Right? It should result in community-centered redistricting processes. So you need to be watching these redistricting processes. And if it's clear that they're not, first of all, get educated on those redistricting criteria and the ranked order. We have a ton of resources about that on our website. I'm happy to do a video presentation about it, anything you'd like. And then actually watch to see if your local city council, your county board of supervisors is following it. So for example, if they're putting protecting incumbents and making sure that everyone can run for election easily at the top of their list, that's a violation of state law, and you should be able to call them on that. If they're putting compactness at the top of the list, they want really simple, easy to understand districts, they're drawing simple rectangles or squares, and they're slicing up communities in order to do it, they're not following the rank criteria in the Fair Maps Act, and you should call them on it. okay? If a large community of color, for example, is not being empowered in any way, they're not being considered in the redistricting process, that's probably a violation of state law, and you should call them on it. And you can engage a wide range of partners that have legal expertise around these issues. So Common Cause can help, Asian Americans Advancing Justice can help, MALDEF can help, NALEO can help, and a wide range of others can help. It's a matter of getting educated on the law and then making sure that people are held accountable to it. One big flag, if your city council or your county board of supervisors says, oh, we're just going to start with the current districts and we're probably not going to move them very much, which we've heard over and over already, that should be a red flag for you, because there is no way they drew districts 10 years ago that just so happened to comply with the criteria in state law that was passed in 2019 in ranked order. It's just not possible. They have to go through a real redistricting process and really listen to community if they're going to comply with state law.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you, Jonathan. Before I actually go to the next question, Commissioner Turner, if I can actually just bring you into this as well, because when you joined the commission, I also imagine that the commission itself gave you a full-on training about the nuts and bolts of all this. I don't know if you can talk about that, like how you've been onboarded as you begin this process.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Christian. I came into the process not having a deep analysis or background at all. And I love to be able to share that, because I think it's a process that all Californians should consider, no matter your background, no matter your education level. There was a very robust training from a lot of our partners, organizations in the community, from the previous commission, from a lot of legal individuals. And so the training is very extensive. It's ongoing, not just once. We've had some repeat trainings to ensure that we are prepared to draw lines that will follow all of the criteria that's given. And so there's a lot of wraparound support that's able to bring you up to speed on what needs to happen. So I feel very confident now that, not so much confident that I have everything together, but I have confidence in the surrounding support that I have to ensure that we are drawing legal and equitable lines that does follow all of the criteria required.
Awesome, awesome. Moving on to the next question. I think, Jonathan, I'll bring you back again for this. Somebody asked, is there any legislation that allows elected officials to draw the lines without a formal redistricting commission, provided that they follow all the legal requirements?
Yeah, so the redistricting commissions are totally voluntary. There was actually a bill that passed the state legislature to mandate redistricting commissions for all counties over 250,000 people. Was vetoed by the governor. And as a result, counties and cities have the opportunity to create a commission or to do the line drawing themselves. And guess what? City councils and county boards of supervisors aren't particularly interested in giving that line drawing power over to someone other than themselves, right? And so in some places, we've been able to advocate for an independent commission. Much more places, they create advisory redistricting commissions where those in power get to control who sits on the commission, and they get to control the final decision around the maps. So yes, I would say that the use of commissions at the local level is actually the exception, not the rule. What we have at the state level in many ways is a model for other states and for the local level, but it remains the case that in most local jurisdictions, sitting incumbents are going to draw their own district lines.
Got it, got it. And so we have another question here, and maybe Petra, maybe you can address this, but somebody asked, where do charter schools fit in this process? This person says that they replace all public schools in her community.
I don't actually have the answer to that question, because
Sure.
I don't think the charter schools are responsible to the school board. So I think that's a whole different ballgame.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm seeing a couple more questions come through here. Just bear with me. Really important question. And I'll actually turn it back to you, Jonathan. So somebody asked about local jurisdictions relying on the expertise of consultants when doing this process. So your thoughts on the role of these consultants and making sure that we're keeping them accountable.
Yeah, so almost every jurisdiction uses consultants of one kind or another. Commissioner Turner knows this well. The state commission spent a really long time evaluating which demographer consultant they were going to use and which legal counsel they were going to use and so on. It's basically impossible for a city council, let's say, and their staff to have all the relevant skills they need in order to do this process themselves. Basically, everybody hires a demographer consultant, and there's not that many of them, frankly. There's, half a dozen or something around the state, and so they're very, very busy this time of year, or this time every decade. And they have different attitudes and personalities and approaches, honestly. But at the end of the day, the consultants that they hire, usually it's a demographer consultant, they might also hire an outreach consultant. Those people are accountable to the elected officials, right? So they should not be the ones controlling the process. The community should be dictating what they want to the city council or to the county board of supervisors. And if anyone sees a consultant driving the process behind the scenes, that's a problem.
Got it. Thank you. There was a question about resources for nonprofits. I know, Petra, you mentioned, anybody can look at your website and just take from that. Jonathan, I know you have a complete list of resources on your website. So, Commissioner Turner, I actually want to ask you this as well, because I myself have gone to the Redistricting Commission website, and I know there are a lot of resources there in terms of just getting the word out. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's there and available for people?
Sure, I was looking for the question again. I think when I initially read it, I read it as far as financial resources,
Sure.
but for sure there are resources. If you go on to the website, there, matter of factly, is a toolkit for social media that's put out on a regular basis. There are videos that's there on YouTube on the site that you're able to look at, not just the full redistricting presentation, even interviews by individual commissioners. Some of the training that we had access to is also available online, so you'd be able to replay that in different settings from an educational standpoint. The COI tool, how to use it, elaborating on that. So the website is really a wealth of information from a resource perspective, now that I put my mind to tools as opposed to funding.
Awesome. I'm not seeing any other questions pop up, but I'll just use my moderator's prerogative and just ask one final question for all of you. And I'll start with Petra, Jonathan, and then end with you, Commissioner Turner. What would you say is just what's one thing people can do within the next 15 minutes of ending this webinar when it comes to redistricting? What comes to mind?
Well, if it's within 15 minutes, I would say go into any of the websites. I think between what Petra, Jonathan, and I, what we've shared, go into any one of those, grab it, and then send it out on social media, amplify the message that people are absolutely needed to get involved in the process. And your voice, this is a time and opportunity where you can utilize your voice, your opinion, and be able to share what is important for you. And I want us to take it. We are locked into this for the next 10 years. So the time is now.
Yeah, and I would also say sign up for the listserv. You guys do a phenomenal job of keeping people informed about when these meetings are happening. So I would actually make an extra plug for that as well. Petra, and then we'll end with Jonathan.
That's the general idea of what I would say, which is just to get more people involved. And if you're going to do it in the next 15 minutes, what I would do is plan to have one of the commissioners to come, bring your local community in, and start the conversation.
Awesome. Jonathan?
My answer would be contact your friendly neighborhood philanthropist and bug them to start funding the work for local communities, because this is work that requires both organizing power, like people power. You have to get people to share their story with their with the state commission or their local government, and that takes just lots of high touch, face-to-face community mobilization. You also need technical knowledge and legal knowledge and so on, because it's a complicated process governed by rules that, if followed, should lead to an equitable, community-centered process. And so we need to bring together the entire nonprofit community and grow our skills in both ways simultaneously if we're going to result in an equitable redistricting process in 2021 at the state and local levels.
Awesome. And I was actually just kidding with the last question. So I do want to make sure we answer this one that just came up about state and local redistricting requirements for rural communities, especially under 100,000 people. So I don't know who can take that question.
Well, I was just going to add for that, again, I was trying to type kind of slow and pay attention, but I was going to add for that our criteria number 4 still requires that counties, we minimize the division of counties. And even if it's a small county, that still would fall under that criteria that we would minimize the division of it. So I'm not certain if there was more needed for that.
Awesome, thank you. Well, thank you, virtual round of applause for the panelists today. And thank you so much for this really great discussion. Again, you know, even for myself, right? No need to be embarrassed here. You know, this is super important. There are a lot of moving parts, but I think at the end of the day, you know, there are very concrete things all of us can do, especially me as a funder, to Jonathan's point, to make sure that we're funding this work. So thank you all. And I'll hand it back to Crispin, who will end the event for us.
Well, firstly, I would like to thank all of our excellent speakers today for sharing all this helpful information. And thank you to the audience for staying through the end. My name is Crispin Delgado. I am Public Policy Director at Northern California Grantmakers. As you've heard today, the state's redistricting process determines how communities are represented in public decision-making bodies across all levels of government. And thus, redistricting has implications for the public policies and resource allocations in education, healthcare, housing, and numerous other arenas affecting people's lives. This was very clear in the past 15 months as we all lived through COVID-19 and we awaited resources from the federal government to test and then vaccinate our communities. Also, most people I know were glued to their television for days after the elections in 2020 to see the results in specific districts within Georgia because those results would directly impact all of our futures. It came down to a few districts. This is why this process is important. So in closing, I want to take a minute to talk about Philanthropy California's Fair Representation Fund that supports community engagement in California's 2021 redistricting process. We encourage and support public involvement in this effort, particularly among historically and currently underrepresented communities. Your participation is critical for developing electoral maps that most fairly represent all of us in California. The stakes are high, and as new electoral maps will shape how communities are represented for the decade ahead. Through contributions from foundations and other funders, the Fair Representation Fund provides grants to statewide and regional nonprofits to engage Californians from historically underrepresented communities. Grants cover public outreach and education, materials developments and trainings, map drawing workshops, and other activities. Nearly all of these groups and additional interested community organizations need further resources to meet their full outreach and engagement goals. I want to share a couple of organizations that we currently work with and fund. So the Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the Asian Law Caucus with Asian Americans Advancing Justice in Los Angeles, the Black Census and Redistricting Hub, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. And some examples of regional organizations include the Alliance in San Diego, the Community Coalition in Los Angeles, the Fresno County Civic Engagement Table, Bay Rising, the Orange County Civic Engagement Table. And so I just wanted to put in a plug, especially for funders on the call that might be interested. Currently, some of these primary funders include the Blue Shield of California Foundation, the California Endowment, the James Irvine Foundation, and the Weingart Foundation. But if you're interested in learning more about this fund and how it can be used, please feel free to reach out to me, Crispin Delgado, so cdelgado@ncg.org. Or we also have a consultant, Amy Dominguez Arms. And I'm hoping that Carla's still on the call. We could share Amy's email as well. And so once again, thank you so much for having us today and for participating. And again, our speakers were just wonderful.